Welcome everybody. Brian Fouts here, and welcome to this event. I am subbing in for Hannah as she is on her way to the airport to go to an event. So I'm going to be stepping in for her today and covering a really cool topic. So guys, give me a chat in that comment box right there. Make sure you guys can hear me, see me, make sure everything is working well, and we'll go and get rolling here in just a moment. I'm getting everything set up for our topic here today. All right. Check there. All right, everybody. So the topic for today is going to be, how is wealth destroyed? So this is a pretty interesting topic when you think about wealth, about accumulating wealth, and actually passing wealth on even generationally. So wealth is destroyed, and there's lots of ways that wealth can get destroyed. And obviously there's lots of ways that you can retain and make sure that wealth lasts. So we're going to get into that topic here today, and how you can actually keep your wealth, but also how it is destroyed. So let's kind of dive on into that real quick. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. All right, everybody should be able to see my screen. So think about this. So when you think about wealth, think generationally, because you've probably heard the saying that wealth is destroyed in 3 generations. So what that means is that, let's say that one generation or one person or one couple creates wealth. Well, by the time that their grandkids receive any of that wealth, it'll be pretty much destroyed or watered down. And I'll share kind of a personal thing, because this is actually, I'm seeing this happen in my own family, where one grandparent or grandparents had quite a wealth, and then as they passed away, that wealth got divided to the next generation, and it's going to happen again. And so by the time it comes to like myself, it's going to be about maybe 10% of what it was originally, because of how it's being passed on and not actually being built. So I've seen this personally. So think about this. Think about how wealth is destroyed, but think about it almost generationally. So let's kind of get into this. So one, as I said, it's watered down among family members. And that is one of the most common ways that wealthy families destroy wealth, is it just gets watered down. And the other big thing that is not passed on, because you can pass on money. That's great. Pass on money by all means. But what is almost more important to pass on? Now, you probably have seen stories or heard about stories of where someone receives a bunch of money, and within a matter of years, they've destroyed it all, or they're a mess. Maybe they got into some bad habits. The money did not do them any good, and that is one of the more important things when you understand about passing wealth on or creating wealth. It's great, but when you pass it on and you don't make sure the people that are receiving the wealth are essentially, I don't want to say responsible enough. But yeah, you've got to be responsible enough to receive that wealth. And so the lack of wealth knowledge being passed on is one of the key things that is missed, and that destroys wealth generationally. Hey, Dex, how you doing, man? So you've got to make sure that you pass on that knowledge. So like, let's say if one generation is an entrepreneur, or they own businesses, and they do not pass that knowledge of entrepreneurship, pass on the knowledge of the business, how is that next generation going to receive that? Well, they might just go crazy and blow all the money and go to Vegas, right? Unfortunately, I have seen that happen in some people, acquaintances, where the money was actually almost poisonous to them because they didn't have that knowledge of how to handle it. And so a lot of people, and we'll talk about how you can actually make sure it doesn't happen, because there are ways to set it up so that doesn't happen. But like, think of like a wealthy families where you hear about those trust fund babies, right? They can literally destroy themselves because that knowledge is not passed on. So that's very important right there. Another way that wealth is destroyed, even generationally, is there's no family purpose. There's no mission. There's no higher reason. And to me, this is a big one, because if you have a family that is aligned around the money and around wealth, it's going to have such a better chance of success. And also think of a business. Think of a business that has no purpose, has no statement, nothing that they can align with their customers on, right? But businesses that have a real strong purpose that their employees can align themselves with, that can attract the right employees to that business, going to have a higher chance of success. It's the same with family, right? So what's the purpose of money? So you have to understand that. What is your purpose for each generation? Why are you wanting to create wealth? Because if you don't pass that mission, that purpose on to that next generation, they're not going to really care. And that's a big one right there. Another one is conflict or differences of opinion. So let's just say that you have a lot of family members and all of a sudden someone passes on and there's a lot of money there. And maybe it's inside their estate, maybe it's going through probate. All of a sudden you've got brothers and sisters that are fighting with each other. And you can go look at a lot of wealthy families where this happens. Maybe there's no direction on how the estate is supposed to be divvied up, I guess I would say. And oh my gosh, there's horror stories about this. And I've even seen it, obviously a lot of us seen it in our own families where they're fighting. All of a sudden, all these relationships that have been there for decades are destroyed because of money. That's right. And that's because there is no path. So conflict of interest, difference of opinions. Man, by the way, I have clients that I'm dealing with this on, by the way, where we're having to help them understand, okay, how do you separate your assets, protect the assets so that this kind of stuff does not happen. Another big one is passing on only money, right? Not assets and not strategies. So if you just pass on a lump sum of money and that's it, right? But no like assets, no strategy associated with the money, which is, knowledge, by the way, man, that money can just disappear in a blink of an eye. And so a lot of, things that I see people have success with generational wealth is they go and create assets with the money and have money as well, but they also have a strategy associated with all of that kind of stuff. And when you combine that with knowledge, man, I mean, you'll have families that will be wealthy for generations after generations after generations. And that's a key thing right there when you only pass on the money. Now, for some reason, this one goes at number 7. I don't know, it's kind of backwards, but that's fine. Another big one is relying on outside advisors or advice. So this is a huge one. And I've seen this unfortunately happen where, let's say someone receives a big chunk of money and they go to a traditional advisor or outside advice and they get the wrong advice. They get the wrong people trying to give speaking in their ear, so to speak. And all of a sudden they've lost money. And I was talking to a client yesterday where this thing happened where they got like 100,000, so not a huge chunk, but a decent 100,000. 25,000 of it was gone right off the bat into a strategy. It was a REIT, by the way, and gone. The whole thing was lost. And they took that advice from an advisor. But here's the thing. So how do you avoid this kind of stuff? One is obviously knowledge and that kind of stuff, but you've got to understand the advice you're getting. And so that's just knowledge, by the way. And so if you go to someone and say, hey, what should I do with my money? That's not the right approach. In fact, the first time I went to a financial advisor, this is probably 15 years ago, something like that. I sat down in front of him with my wife and I had a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper, it said, here's what I want to get out of this meeting. Here's what I want, where I want to be in 3 years and 5 years. And this is what I want my money to do. And I gave it to him. And this advisor said, hey, that's the first time I've ever had anybody do that. First time. And he goes, that's awesome. Because what I did is I gave him what I wanted him to do for me. And so he had a clear path, right? So that way he could give me, certain advice and not give me other advice that wouldn't fit. So that's a big one right there. A lack of estate planning and transfer strategy. That's a big one. You've got to have some way to transfer that estate. And probably have heard of probate, that kind of stuff. So probate, trust, wills, disputes, all these kind of things can come into play. So one of the ways to get around like the probate. So by the way, probate is when an estate goes through the court system, the courts, and it's public. It's public knowledge. You may have heard of those kind of the stories. Unfortunately, I have heard of these things from personal families or from families personally that experienced this, where there's an older couple, grandparents, as an example, and let's say the grandfather passes away. Then all of a sudden the grandmother is getting these phone calls in the middle of the night from random people saying, hey, so sorry about your thing here. Just want to call and see if I can help you with your property, making sure that you don't lose it and all this kind of stuff. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to like acquire assets because they can publicly see that this person passed away. There's an estate, all that kind of stuff. So you don't want your estate being public. And so that's why you have trusts. And you can have wills built inside of the trusts. And then a properly structured trust kind of shields your assets. And also, there's not a lot of disputes because the trust is very ironclad. Your will built inside of the trust is a lot more firm than a will just by itself. Now, once again, this is not financial legal advice because you got to go talk to an attorney to get one of these things done. But I definitely do recommend having that conversation. But this is a big one on how to really protect an estate, I guess I would say, and keep it out of the public's hands. And this is Dexter made a comment right here is ask your advisor what they invest in. Right. So if they're giving you advice in things that they're not participating in, does that make any sense? It's like going to, a Ferrari dealership and the Ferrari guy drives a Honda Accord and has never driven a Ferrari. Well, why would you want to buy it from him? He might not know the best one, right? Or all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a good point right there, Dex. All right. So now let's kind of talk about, now that we talked about ways that you can destroy wealth generationally, let's kind of talk about how generational wealth is created. Because right? That might not be a problem that you have, but guess what? Let's create that problem. I mean, generational wealth, how to pass it on is a good problem to have. So one is you create it during your lifetime. That's why it could be, a high income earner, a doctor or something like that. My grandfather, by the way, was an optometrist, and he created quite a bit of wealth just because he was very consistent. He owned his business, didn't buy a lot of other things, had a great life, had a lot of fun, but he was very wise with his money. Did very well and created a lot of wealth in his life. Be a business or entrepreneurship. So I've owned businesses that have done, multiple 7 figures in a year. That's a great way to do that. It's all kind of stressful, to be honest. Entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur. I've owned lots and lots of businesses. Think of real estate investors, things like that. Investing over your lifetime, investing wisely. So a lot of people, unfortunately, that I talk to, they've done really well. They've made money over their lifetime, but they've never taken anything off the table, so to speak. Like take 10%, take 15% and put it into a bucket over here where that can help that money grow. So investing over a lifetime is great. I have people that have done that and they've, worked, 40 years. So they're close to 60 usually. But they've got 7 figures. And now they're looking at, okay, now how do I turn that 7 figures into something else and pass it on? So lucky, you can get lucky, by the way. You could fall into something. I've actually had clients that had that happen where something happened and all of a sudden they got a lump sum of money. Some of it's not so lucky because it might be from unfortunately, like a lawsuit, something bad happened, or a car accident, they got injured, but they got a lot of money. So that's some of the ways that you can create wealth during your lifetime. And then, of course, how is generational wealth created? Create a vehicle that creates that wealth for the next generation. So think about that. So you create a vehicle that upon your passing generates wealth that the next generation can use to keep the cycle going. Obviously, one of the things we talk about here at the Money Multiplier is infinite banking. And I'm going to go through some examples here in a little bit on how you can do this generationally. It's really powerful. I'm going to show you some actual numbers of actual illustrations on how infinite banking can create generational wealth. And the numbers are absolutely staggering. All right. They're amazing. Okay. So bottom line is this. If you want to create wealth, whether it's for you, next generation, doesn't really matter. The bottom line is it has to start somewhere with someone making a decision. So when you think of when you look at wealthy families that have had wealth for, more than one generation, the thing is it started with one person planting that seed that then created the fruit for the rest of the generations, the wealth, so to speak. Rockefeller, the Rothschilds, all those ones, you can go back in history and look, there's a point at which also the wealth was created. Right. And that person, they may not have seen all that wealth. They may have seen a little portion of it, maybe a sliver of it, but they knew that generationally, there was going to be a lot of wealth. So they created that plan for the next generation or 3 generations down the line. And that's a big one is you kind of have to start that process. And it starts with you. And it's a weird thing to think about this. And I talked to a lot of clients about this where we say, hey, I want to create generational wealth. And we kind of talk about it a little bit. And I say, it's kind of weird, or they might say this, is that I'm not going to see that wealth, but my kids are, my grandkids are. So it's kind of a weird thing. I feel good about it, but at the same time, I'm like, I might not see the numbers they're going to see. So like for me, like when I first was, my 20s, early 20s, I wish I had done entrepreneurship. I wish I had done real estate or something like that, because I would be able to create a lot of wealth in those earlier years. And I had a great job back then, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't wealth at all. Hey Shane, thanks, man. Yeah, so this is a cool one right here. So we're gonna go through how you can do this. And this is a cool thing for anybody, whether you're a grandparent, whether you're in your 20s getting started. This is a great thing to start thinking about. And it's juvenile infinite banking policies. So these are infinite banking policies that are for kids under the age of 18. So they're 17 or under. And this is a great way to do it. Now, I usually don't recommend you starting infinite banking or doing this with juvenile policies. It's usually the second or third step. So I call this the waterfall effect. And I wish I had a graphic for this. I can pull it from a whiteboard, but I'm not going to. But by waterfall effect, what I mean by that is, well, actually, can I do this? Nope. I thought I could write on the thing. I can't. But anyway, so think of like a waterfall effect where you have like your family tree, so to speak. And you, if you're like the grandparents or the parents, you're at the very top. You're the patriarchs. And then you have all of the generations below you. So where does it start? When you're starting to create generational wealth or infinite banking, it starts at the top. And then I call it the waterfall effect. Then you keep going down through the generations doing policies. And so you might not, you do policies on you first, maybe. And then it's the next generation, your kids, if they're adults, and then grandkids. Or if you have kids that are young like me, my kids are 15 and under. I'm first, my wife's first. And then we do policies on the kids. And then as I go through my life and they get older and maybe have kids of their own, grandkid policies. And so I'm passing on the knowledge of infinite banking to all those generations and also funding the policies. And eventually they'll take over the funding as well. So juvenile policies are pretty powerful because you can start when they're born. So everybody always asks, well, when's the first time I can start a policy? Well, it's right away. It's immediate. Within 2 weeks. They have to have a social security card. I think it's about 2 weeks to get that usually. So once they have that, you can start a policy. Pretty cool. So how much can you do on a child? Well, the coverage amounts are based upon the guardians or parents of them. So let's say if I have a $500,000 policy, which I do have one that's about 550, my kids can get up to 550 on them, or I can get a policy up to that death benefit on them. Now, here's the kind of interesting thing about juvenile policies, because they are a bit unique. The guardian must be covered first. So this is kind of interesting, right? So if you go to a life insurance company or agent and say, hey, I want to get a policy on my 5-year-old, I'm going to say, okay, great. So what kind of coverage do you have? Oh, I don't have any death benefit coverage. Then I'm going to be like, well, are you insurable? Yeah, I'm pretty healthy. Okay, you can't do it on your 5-year-old. Unless there's a very good reason, which there probably is not. You have to be covered first because, and this is a weird way to say it, is there a financial loss if the parent passes away or the guardian passes? Yes. Is there a financial loss if the child passes? No. So they want you to insure the income first, which is you or the income earner. So keep that in mind. The other way that you can do it on a child without being insured is if the guardian is uninsurable. In that case, so let's say both parents are uninsurable, then you can do policies on the kids without you being covered first. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay, this is a kind of a cool one. So there are grandparent policies. And so what's a grandparent policy and what do I mean by that? A grandparent, so if I have a child that has kids and I'm a grandparent, I can get policies on the grandkids without the parents or the guardians having coverage or being insurable, all that kind of stuff. There's a limit on the death benefit. It's $100,000, and the parents have to do the application for their kids. But I, as a grandparent, can get policies on my grandkids up to a certain amount without any kind of qualifications on the guardians. So some cool things. And so the last time I did the presentation, I had quite a few, like half a dozen grandparents reaching out to me saying, I did not know this. And the grandparent, by the way, had infinite banking policies, but had never heard this before of grandparent policies. And their kids, the adult kids, were not really interested in getting policies yet. So they were able to go and get them on the grandkids. So that was kind of fun. Now, this is kind of interesting. You must treat all kids equally. So what I mean by that is, let's say for me, I have a 15, 12, and 10-year-old. Okay, I cannot go get a policy on just the 15-year-old. The insurance company is going to say, well, why are you doing that? Why wouldn't you treat all kids equally? So you've got to get policies on all the kids at the same time if they're all under 18, and they got to be equal too. So you can't do a $500 per month premium on like my daughter Zoe. I can't do $500 on her, and then on my youngest daughter Chloe, I can't do $100 on her. They've got to be equal or close to, and they can be equally based upon premiums and death benefit, by the way. So it's either one. So you can kind of manipulate it a little bit, but that's kind of an interesting aspect of juvenile policies is you must treat the kids equally. So there you go. Now, why juvenile policies? So this is the fun part. I'm going to show you some actual examples of illustrations here. It's because you'll get 10 to 15 times the money for the next generation. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you look at infinite banking and you're funding these policies for that child over their lifetime, and they're going to take it over eventually. Let's say you put in, I'll show you some numbers. You put in X number of dollars, but the death benefit, which goes on to that next generation, is going to be worth 10 to 15 times what has been put into that policy over their lifetime. So you're also, by the way, using the money during the lifetime as well. So if you understand what I just said right there, you'll understand why the Rockefellers, the wealthy families, politicians, by the way, lots of politicians do infinite banking. If you can take $1 and turn it into $15 tax-free guaranteed, do you think if you did this on all the family members that the next generation is going to have a very large amount of capital to work with? Absolutely. So if you've ever wondered why some wealthy families seem to always have, if you look at their history, they have a lot of money every generation. They seem to get wealthier by leaps and bounds. This is one of the ways they're doing that because it's tax-free, guaranteed, and it's a private strategy. So it does not show up on a lot of their financials. Very interesting. So let's go ahead and look at some of these illustrations. Okay, so this one right here. So I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see it because I realize it's kind of small. And where's my thing? Oops. It just went away. There it is. Okay. So in this scenario, what you'll see here is this is Future Rockstar. That's their name. They were born a few months ago. It is a male, and we're putting in $250 per month. Okay. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So as you can see here, 3,000. Whoops. Let's go up here. Age 1. Here we go. So we got about $3,000 going in every single year. Now, what you're going to see here, the cash value, what they can use, what they can loan out to themselves at the end of the first year is $2,149. So you're saying, well, Brian, okay, that's a good policy right there. And then you can see it grows over time. And you can see by year 5, they're actually getting more growth in the cash value than they put into it. But once again, since this is a juvenile, a young person, they have a long time, a long life for compounding to start catching up. So let's kind of look at the numbers and how this policy evolves over their lifetime. So let's just go look at year 18 or age 18 right here. So what do we see here? So we're going to see that they have $68,000 right here of cash value available to use. So at 18, maybe they graduate high school, they want to go into college, or maybe they want to go be an entrepreneur, whatever. This is something that they can now use, or you as the guardians or parents can now use to help them get started. But the cool thing is, unlike a 529 or some other kind of college savings plans, that money never stops growing, and they can use this perpetually throughout their entire life. Also notice the death benefit. It is $530,000, yet they've only put in, well, like $50,000. So if you do the math right there, that's pretty amazing right there. Let's go look at year 20, age 20, right here. At age 20, this policy has received $59,000. It is worth $79,000 as cash value available, and the death benefit is $574,000. But what do you notice here? You'll notice the cash value never stops going up. It's always growing, uninterrupted, and the death benefit as well never stops growing. In fact, if you look at year 19 to year 20, the death benefit went up by $20,000, but they only put in $3,000. And the cash value went up by $5,724, but they only put in $3,000. So now let's go look at how this policy is going to evolve over this person's lifetime, realizing this is only one policy. Do you think if they understand how this thing works and they see these kind of numbers, they're not going to do more policies and more policies throughout their lifetime? Absolutely, yes, they are. The wealthy, when they do this, they'll get more and more policies. Maybe it's every 5 years they get a new one on each person. So they're stacking policies throughout their lifetime. As this person's income goes up, a portion of the income can go into a policy and keep the cycle going. So let's go look at year 50. Now this is where it gets really fun. Now, yes, this is 50 years down the road, but this is generational wealth. So look at this. This person has put in $103,000. I'm going to do some math here for us. $103,000. What is the cash value? $366,000. So if I take 366 divided by 103, that's 3.5, which means that their money they put into this policy over the last 50 years is worth 3.5 times more now that they can borrow out and use to invest, build wealth, buy cars, pay for college, grow a business, whatever they want. But what you'll also notice over here is the death benefit is $1.02 million. So if I do the math on that, that's 9.9. I'm going to round up a little bit and just say 10. Now, God forbid something happens to this person at age 50, that's pretty young. That money they put into this policy, that $103,000, is going to be worth 10 times that amount, tax-free, guaranteed to the next generation. But keep in mind, they've also used the cash value, the 366 right there, during the lifetime to build assets, build wealth, create more cash flow, whatever. So with infinite banking, what you're doing, you're creating guaranteed tax-free generational wealth. But you're also, if you're being wise with your banking system and you've been using this for your entire life, you're also creating more wealth through assets, through business, through other things, through investing. Now, for fun, let's go ahead and look at age. Let's go see, what is it, age 80 maybe? Let's look at age 75. Age 75. So we've reduced premiums down over time. So you can see that at, let's see, it was at year 30 or age 30, we reduced premiums because maybe now we're doing another policy. So let's look at age 75. At age 75, $122,000 has gone into this thing. What's the cash value? Remember, the last time in age 50, 25 years ago, it was $103,000. Now it's $122,000. But the cash value went from 366 at age 50 to $1.048 million at age 75. So let's do the math on that one. 1048 divided by 122 is 8.6. So this person at age 75 has access to 8.5 times more capital than they put into this thing over their lifetime. But keep in mind, they didn't start this. Their parents or grandparents did. And now keep in mind, this person, if they are using this, they have done more policies. So this is one of maybe 10 this person might have at this point in their lifetime. So the access to capital they have is probably in the tens of millions of dollars. So keep that in mind. Now, look at the death benefit. It is $1.5 million. So if I do the math on that, oops, I just did that wrong. 516 divided by 122, that's 12.4 times what they put into it. So once again, if something happens, and by the way, there's two things in life we're going to do. We're going to live, we're going to die. It's pretty much a guarantee right there. So upon the graduation of this person, we call it graduated, the next generation is going to get 12.4 times at age 75, 12.4 times what this has been funded with. So you're taking $1 and turning it into $12 guaranteed tax-free. So this is one of the reasons why these policies, the juvenile ones, are so extraordinary, is because of these numbers. Now, you can do this at any age. I'm just showing you generationally how juvenile policies can fit into this. Okay, because it doesn't matter when you start the policies. It doesn't matter if you're 7 years old or 1 year old. You can still do this. The scale is just going to change. Now, the next thing I want to show you, this is going to be the same example here, except on this example, we do what's called a dump in right here. So at the very beginning of this policy, the guardian, the parent, the mom or the dad says, hey, we're going to start a policy on Future Rockstar of $250 per month. And also we're going to deposit $1,500 at the very beginning as a dump in. Optional, you don't have to do that, but they're going to go ahead and do this. So what that means is that they're going to have a bit more cash value at the very beginning. Now, at age 18, now they've got $77,000. On this one, at age 18, they had $68,000. So $68,000 versus age 18, or sorry, $71,000. So you can see it has a bit more cash value inside of it. The death benefit is also a bit higher. Now, what does this mean going forward? Let's look at age 50 one more time. So 105 has gone into it. On this one, 103,000, so a little bit more. Cash value is 366 on this one. With the one with the dump in, it's 377. So that $1,500 has turned into an additional, as far as cash value goes, around, what is that number? $11,000. So in 50 years, now keep in mind, that's a long time, but this is the power of compounding. So a little bit of money has turned into a lot more money down the road that this person can use. Additionally, the death benefit has gone from $1.02 million to $1.053 thousand. So you can just see how these compounding over time, how these policies compound, how you can create so much generational wealth for that next generation tax-free guaranteed. And you can hear me, I keep saying that because I don't mind paying taxes, but I'm a lot happier paying zero. So especially for the next generation, for my kids, by the way. And then at age 75, 124 has gone in. Look at this, $1.08 million. The cash value has gone up by $40,000 because of that one little deposit of $1,500. And the death benefit has gone up, I think it's like $50,000, something like that. So you can just see how generationally these things are extremely powerful. Now, we're going to look at some more things here. This is where it gets really fun. So there are more than one company that can do this, by the way. I'm just showing you an example of one company. Let's go look at another one. So this is a future Olympian. Okay, this was a different company. Same thing, $250 per month. Let me blow this up so you guys can see it. So $250 per month going into this policy. This one is age 1, and this one is a female. Yeah, female. Okay, let's look at this one. So at age 1, $3,000 goes in. Cash value is $1,889. Now, if you were paying attention on the previous numbers, this is a different company, by the way. The cash value is lower with this company than it was with the prior company. So once again, this company right here, less cash value year 1. All right, so keep that in mind. Now let's go look at 18. 3,000 has got into this thing. We put in, how much we put in? We put in 54,000 into this policy so far. But look at the cash value now. It's $72,000. Right? $72,000. So that means if you come back to these prior illustrations I was showing you, let's go look at age 18, 74,000. So this one has more than this company. So why am I showing this one different? Well, this company, you have to drop the premiums down eventually. But check this out. Let's go to 50. 102 has gone in. Look at the cash value. So 102,000, the same as the other company, by the way, $102,000. The cash value on this one is $445,000. Keep that number in mind. On this one at age 50, 103, so $1,000 more has gone in. The cash value is 366. 366 versus 445. That's a big difference, right? Okay. So that is a consideration. Now, if you guys are paying attention, I know we're getting into some details here, but this is very important to understand. This is why me as an infinite banking practitioner, I have to know all the numbers. I have to know the different nuances between each company. I have to know how they perform over time, depending on age of the person, gender, all that kind of stuff, so that I can inform you, the client, how these things work, because I'm not going to just go take something off the shelf and slap it in front of you without going through these different nuances. Because Yes, this company has a significantly higher cash value, but check out the death benefit. On the one that the one we looked at earlier, it's a $1.2 million death benefit. And on this one, it is $845,000. Lot lower death benefit, a lot higher cash value. Think of it like scales. One's got to go up, one's got to go down. Now let's go look at age 75 just to kind of complete the picture here. At age 75, I'm going to use year 75, age 76 to keep it equal. 135 has gone in. Cash value is $1.487 million. What was it on the prior one? Let's go to age 75. So 122 has gone into this one. So 122 versus 135. So more has gone into the second company. Cash value on this one is 1.04. But this one over here is 1.48. That is a difference of over $440,000. $440,000. That's a big difference. Look at the death benefit on this one. 1.5 million. What's it on the second company? Remember at age 50, it had a lot less death benefit? Check this out. At age 75, the second company, you put a bit more into it. You put about $10,000 more into it. The death benefit is now $300,000 and more than the first company. So as you can see, these companies perform differently throughout their lifetime. Second company, so company B, had a smaller death benefit at age 50 and a higher death benefit at age 75 and a higher cash value. You put a slightly bit more into it. So these are the nuances between each company. So if you're thinking about generational wealth, this is definitely information that you should be not taught, but you should be getting from the specialist that you're talking to. So this is part of this information here for you guys. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is on company B. Company B, can you do a dump in? Remember on the first company, I did the second illustration, had a $1,500 dump in. You can't do that on company B. They won't allow it to happen. And on company B, you have to drop the premiums down early on. You don't have a choice of funding the full $3,000 for as long as you want with company like company A. You have to drop them down at year 22 to year 32. So they got to go down. But as you can see, if you do an apples to apples comparison, company A has more cash value early on, more death benefit in the middle part of it, but less cash value and less death benefit in the later years. I call it quarter four versus company B. Now on this one, on company B, I was able to squeeze in $500 at the very beginning. Able to do that. Now, does that make sense to do that with company B? So I'm going to do a quick math here. I'm going to do this one right here. So let's do a ratio between what you've put into this thing versus how the cash value has grown. So this is just math. So I'm going to do 1, 6, 7, 9. All I'm doing is doing ratios here of what you're getting out of it. So on this one, you put a $500 dump in at the very beginning. Cash value is $1.67 million. The total premiums that have gone in are $161,000. So your cash value is 10.4 times what you put into the policy. So that's the multiple. Now, just for the heck of it, let's go look at the first policy with no $500 dump in. You can see that your cash value is less. So it's less, and the amount you put in is also less. So let's look at the efficiency of doing a $500 dump in versus not doing it. So once again, it's just math. So 1.487 divided by 135 or 136, 10.9 multiple. So what that means is doing the dump in made your multiple of how much cash value you have versus what you put in less. The policy with no dump in is actually more efficient from a multiples perspective, meaning you're getting more cash value versus what you put into it. Now, the overall cash value and death benefit is less, but the multiple is better. So what I look at that for is, well, what would that help me decide? It would help me decide whether I want to do one policy or do multiple policies that are just as efficient as this one. In my opinion, I would want to do multiple policies that are efficient versus just trying to do one policy and shove a bunch in the front of it, because it's not going to be as efficient down the road. Because more than one policy, as you can see, is going to get you a lot more cash value, a lot more death benefit, and a lot more generational wealth. So anyways, I want to share with you how these policies work, because these are real illustrations, real policies that we do for clients all day long. And I got a private question here. Someone asked, hi, hey, Brian, how can I get in touch with you? I'm going to go ahead and put up my information. So, and I'll put it in the chat box as well. So you can reach out to me at brian@chrisnagel.com, or you can schedule a call with me at brian.beyourownbanker.com. So once again, I'll go ahead and put these in the chat box. But yeah, these are pretty interesting things. I find this is fascinating. I've done this presentation a few different ways on juvenile policies and generational wealth. But if you understand how this works and you realize, my gosh, I can plant a seed for a couple hundred. I mean, you could do a policy for $100 a month for a juvenile. You don't have to do $250. You can do $100 a month. It's going to have the exact same ratios. And so if you understand that, you understand, like, oh my gosh, this can be the seed for my next generation. It can be the seed for, my grandkids, their grandkids. I mean, you can go like 5 to 6 generations deep with this if you understand at the very beginning how you can actually create that vehicle that will take this from not just your generation, but generations beyond you, by going through like a trust, passing on the knowledge, and passing on the strategy of how to do this. But it's extremely powerful. Yeah, and I kind of geek out on this kind of stuff. It's kind of why I talk so fast. But yeah, I find this stuff just amazing. But yeah, any questions, any thoughts on this? Yeah, Marcus is very interesting. Yeah, Dave. Yeah, it's pretty crazy how these things work. Yeah, and then of course, Shane and Dex and you guys are actually experiencing this kind of stuff. You've been looking at this stuff for quite some time. But yeah, you've heard me talk about this before. All right. Any questions? Any thoughts? Otherwise, I'll let you all get back to your week, and appreciate Hannah for letting me come in and sub in her place and share this information. All right, everybody. Well, with that, take care. If you guys want to reach out to me, there's my information. Once again, brian@chrisnagel.com is my best email. And then if you want to schedule a call, talk with me about this kind of stuff, brian.beyourownbanker.com. All right, everybody. Take care.